Petroglyph National Monument has several sites in and around Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's known for its Hispanic culture and the area's many pueblos, but its native culture goes back thousands of years, and some of them made rock art. Petroglyph National Monument is on the edge of a volcanic escarpment where ancestral Pueblo people made over 20,000 petroglyphs. The National Monument has 5 separate locations. I went to the visitor center first. This guy was the greeter. He was the mask police. I shot this in December of 2021. It turns out there are no trails here and no petroglyphs. But there is a very well-spoken interpretive ranger named David Arellano, and he's going to tell us about this place.
We are at Petroglyph National Monument. We're a national park site here on the west side of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we have over 20,000 petroglyphs. Petro means rock and glyph is carving. So petroglyphs are rock carvings. And of course, the Southwest here is known for petroglyphs. And again, we have a lot of them. All of our petroglyphs are carved into a basalt. It's called basalt. It's a type of lava rock. And we have volcanoes here. On the western side of the park, we have 5 fissure volcanoes. And where those fissures were, or cracks in the earth, is where all the lava rock came out. A series of flows took place around 200,000 years ago and created this volcanic landscape. And of course, much, much later, native people, specifically the ancestral Pueblo, started carving petroglyphs here. Most of our petroglyphs were carved between 1300 and around 1680. And petroglyphs are not a language as we understand a language. They were definitely communicating things. The ancestral Pueblo were definitely using petroglyphs as a form of communication. A lot of that communication were spiritual in nature, and they had really deep held beliefs having to do with volcanoes. It was part of their origin stories and their belief system. And so volcanoes were seen as a sacred place. And it's not by chance that they decided to leave their petroglyphs, again, many of which are spiritual in nature, here in large concentrations. Even people that live in the Southwest often don't know the difference, for example, between a petroglyph and a pictograph. A pictograph is a painting on rock, and again, petroglyphs are rock carvings. And what makes the Southwest really known for petroglyphs is that here in the desert environment, there's something called a desert varnish. It's like a patina that forms on the outside of the rock over a long period of time, literally thousands of years. The outside of the rock gets dark, and in the case of basalt is more natural color is gray, but then over time this dark, it's almost like a rust quality forms on the outside of the rock. But native people determined probably several thousand years ago that if they remove that top surface, they get into the lighter, more natural gray color of the rock, and that's what creates the contrast. That's how we're able to see these images. So there's no paint involved at all, and the weathering process will continue, and that's a rough way of we can sort of date petroglyphs is how faded they are. But that's not an exact science. It's certainly not anything to the degree of, say, carbon dating, where you're able to really kind of pinpoint a range.
So tell me about the different sites. There's nothing really at the visitor center.
Right, here at the visitor center, we have a small gift shop and a film that we show. That's really it's really kind of native voices. It's from contemporary Pueblo people's perspective on the significance of this site and the significance of petroglyphs. And then you drive to one of the 3 petroglyph viewing sites, and then on the western side again we have the volcanoes, and there's no petroglyphs there, but there's about 3.5 miles of trail, and you're hiking among the what are locally known as the 3 Sisters, the 3 largest volcanoes here. We have cinder cones and spatter cones, and they are small volcanoes. So fissure volcanoes are referred to as monogenic volcanoes, meaning they're kind of a one-shot deal. We believe most of our volcanoes, again, they were active around 200,000 years ago, which in geologic terms is actually not very long. And so up here in the high dry desert, there's a lot of features, geologic and volcanic features that are very well preserved. Our fissure volcanoes here are associated with the Rio Grande Rift, and that's a stretching of the surface of the Earth that starts in southern Colorado and then stretches out into Texas. So it's a big swath of area, and that stretching has created that stretching of the surface of the Earth has put us in closer contact with magma, which is usually really deep into the Earth. It's put us in closer contact with that. So there's more susceptibility of that magma coming out. And there's a number of volcanic fields that are like us that are associated with the Rio Grande Rift. Depictions of most of our petroglyphs, we believe, were carved between 1300 and around 1680. It's considered the Pueblo IV period. So it's really after the story of Mesa Verde, the story of Chaco Canyon. It's kind of the next stage where Pueblo people, ancestral Pueblo people, were leaving the Four Corners area and often connecting with other culturally similar groups that were already here on the Rio Grande River, but they were really developed. Those populations really swelled starting at around 1300, and they were coming from, again, the Four Corners area. So that's a kind of loose story.
Because there's more water here.
Well, there's lots of reasons that researchers and archaeologists believe that the ancestral Pueblo were leaving the Four Corners area, and certainly water is central to often those theories. It's not by chance that many of the settlements that ancestral Pueblo settled in were along the Rio Grande here, and we think most of our petroglyphs were carved by people that were living in a pueblo that was along the Rio Grande, only a couple of miles from here. And they were coming up here for spiritual reasons having to do with the volcanoes. They were also hunting, and there's a lot of depictions of wildlife that they were hunting, as well as in some cases specifically hunting scenes that they were depicting in the form of petroglyphs. And they were probably also gathering some plants here. They were also growing corn here. They were farmers, the ancestral Pueblo. And in some cases they were growing corn around the escarpment, creating little terraces that were catching water and building up soil. And then so they were coming here for that purpose as well. Coyotes. And there's many examples. There's only one area of the monument, which is called Boca Negra, the most accessible site that does not allow for pets. But pets will, if they're not on a leash, they'll run off, they'll chase wildlife. This is a pretty harsh desert environment. We don't really want to add stress to the wildlife here, which are really eking out a survival. We have two types of rabbits, two types of squirrels that live primarily in this, what's called the escarpment here, this volcanic escarpment, which is basically the end of the lava flow. And all these boulders create little crevices and cracks where those animals, those rodents, can live and hide under. But it's a hard existence. So dogs, unfortunately, will get all excited and race after them. They'll also race up the escarpment after these animals, and that creates erosion problems. The escarpment's very, very susceptible to erosion, and we don't want to create an additional erosion, because then eventually the boulders with the petroglyphs on them can actually become unstable and fall over. And then also dogs can get into, they can be aggressive, they can scare young people, etc. The other problem is that the monument is entirely filled with coyotes, and there's many examples of coyotes attacking and taking pets, dogs that are off leash, and we've never had it happen with any animal that's on a leash. Coyotes generally will avoid people.
What about their urine?
Well, that can also be a problem. They'll start digging after an animal. They could urinate, and then that could throw off some wildlife. But it's more the digging and chasing animals that's a real issue for us. The three petroglyph viewing sites are all a little different, but they all have very good petroglyphs, and I don't know if you want me to go into the specifics of the different sites, but
no, I'll take it from here. Boca Negra is just a couple of miles up the road, and dogs are not allowed at this one. And while we drive there, I should probably tell you that, you should do what I didn't do. That is, go to the park's website. I've been to over half the national parks, and I still don't do this enough. It's a great way to learn about the park, its trails, and its hours of operation. It's there that I learned that this is the easiest place to see petroglyphs. There are several near the trailhead. It takes about an hour to hike all 3 of the connecting trails, and you'll see about 100 petroglyphs along the way. The park closes at 4:30, so plan accordingly. And one more thing. The trail up the escarpment is steep and rough. It may be too much for some people. That's all I'm going to show you of the trail because, well, I don't want to ruin it for you. But remember, if you don't have much time, this is the easiest and fastest place to see petroglyphs. We're now going to go to Piedras Marquetas Canyon. It's about 4 miles from here and 6.5 miles from the visitor center.
Okay.
Dogs are allowed on a leash as long as it's only 6 feet long. There are about 400 petroglyphs around the trails here, including the famous rock with all the hands. The first glyphs are about a 1/4 mile down the trail, which is 1.5 miles round trip. And once again, I don't want to show you everything, but here's a few examples of what you'll see. Now we're going to the Rinconada Canyon site. It's the closest to the visitor center, but it's where the glyphs are farthest away from the trailhead. The trail is a 2.2-mile sandy loop in a little valley, and you never have to climb the escarpment. After several minutes of walking on hard-packed sand, I still hadn't seen any glyphs. If I had been to the website, I would have known that the first of about 300 are 3/4 of a mile down the trail, near the boxed end of the canyon. Here's some of what you'll see. This is a popular spot for locals, and it has the longest hours. The gate is open from sunrise to sunset. By the way, there is water at the visitor center, and it can get really hot here. But there is no water at any of the trail sites. And by the way, the elevation is about 1 mile high at 5,200 feet. The volcano section doesn't have any petroglyphs. It's a place where there are several cinder cones. They're also called spatter cones. They tend to be small and they only erupt once. They just sort of spatter the material out. And generally, this material is pumice. You ever see a bag of lava rocks at Home Depot? It likely came from a volcano like this. They wanted to prevent this pumice from being packaged, so they made it a part of the National Monument. The trails are a nice place for a hike, though. Well, that's Petroglyph National Monument. It's really 4 parks in one. To me, petroglyphs are little time capsules that really make you think about the people who carved each one with another rock. Why did they do it? To show the world what they hunted? Or what they looked like? Or simply to let everyone know that they were there? We'll never know exactly what they were trying to communicate, but that's a big part of the fun of a place like this.